Well, welcome everybody. So good to see you. So good to be with you and celebrate today our friend and colleague, Jon B. Wahling. Yes, bravo. Jon, you're among us. For sure.
Happy birthday.
Yes, and it's his birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jon. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Bob, for that call. He'd love that. And Bob got us some balloons to celebrate Jon's birthday. And the community gathered here with our very special colleague and friends of Jon will tell stories, say how it is. Tracy Brown, you have known him. Sandy Aska, as you have known him. And we'll chime in to say how we have known him. Certainly as a colleague, I've known him, but I knew him and my husband Bob knew him because his dog, Basil, mated our dog, Scotty. And we had a litter of 4. Back and forth did we share the celebration of these doggies that we now, with Jon, celebrate. So, Retrospective is the title of this exquisite exhibit. And Jon, in his history, was one of the 4 founders of our Cultural Arts Center. He designed the weaving and dye studios. He really converted. He was part of the conversion of this place that was named the Jewel of the City. And he, as you will share, was back to Parsons and Oak at the old Arts and Crafts Cultural Arts Center. But his vision, working with Mel Dodge, brought us here to this jewel of our city. Jon died senselessly by crazy COVID. And while he was in the hospital, I remember Vazi saying, write to him. But that's the connection I had. I knew I'd written to him. I knew he knew more than we did about his having COVID. But he's with us in spirit today, celebrating his birthday. And thank you, Jen, for the cupcakes that your husband, Tim, baked to celebrate Jon's birthday, and the beautiful table and the candles that we have celebrating those cupcakes. Our guest presenters today, Tracy, y'all come up here. Sandy, y'all come. Tracy's a ceramic artist, has a degree from the Ohio State University in visual communication design and photography. She passionately creates functional, usable, well-crafted ceramics. Tracy's decorations are designed to bring joy and beauty to daily rituals. Tracy, you brought us joy as you ritualized and helped set up this exhibit. For hours did you put this together. And Sandy, you're a figurative ceramic artist, painter, and photographer. And you started taking classes at the Adult Art and the Craft Center, as it was originally known, before it became the Cultural Arts Center. Across from that Parsons and Oak, the old firehouse.
That's right.
Wow. And you helped Jon when he did the International Fiber Show.
That's right.
And your degrees from the Ohio State University in art education You worked as a leader for a number of years at the Beatty Recreation Center.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So we have you with us, sharing who Jon Wahling is to you now and then, friend and artist.
Thank you.
Okay, take it away.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. And now you got your...
I don't want to lose your glasses there.
Okay, let me take this. And...
Okay, I have a question. How many of you knew or met Jon Wahling? Wow. So you're going to know what we're talking about. I have to say that the last time I saw Jon before he passed, I went to dinner at his house. And at this dinner was also a man named Hal Stevens, who worked for the Watkins Printing Company, but developed the Ohio Designer Craftsman Organization and all of the winter fairs. In addition to that, Jim Mason was there, and Jim Mason was the sculptor instructor at the Adult Arts and Crafts Center. That's where he started out at Parsons and Oak. And the three of us got together. Jon cooked dinner, which was quite amazing. He was quite a culinarian, thank you. And so we got together to discuss the history of the arts in the city of Columbus and the Adult Arts and Crafts Center in general, because our feeling was that awareness of the arts and crafts in the city began when this center opened. And that really wasn't the case. So I am going to give you a little bit of history before I start talking about Jon, so just bear with me. The reason the Adult Arts and Crafts Center opened was because in about 1955, I'm going to read this to you because it's so much better. Was because it was generated by the arts and crafts movement that began in Britain in the late 19th century. And the belief of the arts and crafts movement was a belief in craftsmanship and the inherent beauty of natural material. Their values were simplicity, utility, and beauty, and they found their inspiration in nature. And at this time in history, the era at that time was very industrialized. They were coming out of a war, and there was a major cultural shift in Britain, and then it moved into the United States. And it became part of the Art Nouveau and the Art Deco movement, the mid-century modern movement, and then the arts and crafts movement moved forward in the 1950s. So that being said, in 1952, the city became interested in the value of this moment for adults and what it could bring to the Columbus community and the cultural scene. And so Nick Barrick, who was the director of the Columbus Recreation Department, assigned his assistant, who was named Dorothy Jones, to establish a citizens' art committee for the community. And to support this initiative, support for this initiative was given by the American Crafts Council. So this art center, as it stood as the Adult Arts and Crafts Center at Parsons and Oak, was one of the first art centers in the United States, actually. So the Citizens Art Committee included people from Ohio State, Columbus College of Art and Design, the Columbus Museum of Art, and such leaders in the community as Fran Lazarus of the Lazarus Department Store. And they believed that participation in the arts was a stimulating and congenial atmosphere which could be rewarding and invigorating as a pursuit for adults. It established community. It established creativity. It established a fellowship and created long-term friendships coming to classes at the Art Center. So the department made plans to move forward, and the city's rec department merged with Parks Department in 1955. When the firehouse, the number 12 firehouse, came available at 734 Oak Street, many people thought there was kind of a competition for who was going to get that building and use it. But the city prevailed, and the first home of the Art Center was established. The interior was renovated and equipped for classes in ceramics, enameling, jewelry making, painting and drawing, weaving, and fiber arts. It opened its doors near the east side at Parsons and Oak Street. Tom Sellers was the first director, followed by Dora Rosenfeld. These are all people that I knew and loved. And in 1961, when I started going to CCID, I lived directly across the street from the Art Center. The double that I lived in is still there. And at night, I'd sit and I'd look inside, all the lights were on, and it was dark outside. It was so romantic looking. And the people were in there throwing pots and doing their thing in ceramics, and it was so beautiful. So I started going over there. And at that point in time, I took all the classes that were available, one of which was Jon's weaving class, which was upstairs in the firehouse. And he had about 8 looms up there. And so I learned the craft of weaving from Jon Wahling. I still have some of the pieces that Jon helped me weave. I remember one of them was a kind of a cloth like you put over you on the couch. And it was orange and pink and yellow. And it was a really nice, fine wool. And Jon took a look at it and he said, "Oh, Sandy, you need to run a shot of purple through there." And so I put in a wide band of purple, and it turned the thing from something that was kind of mundane into something that was really special and beautiful. So in that environment that Jon created, we made a lot of friends in that environment. I mean, I remember becoming friends with Bill Casto from the Casto family, and Ellen O'Shaughnessy, Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy. Ellen O'Shaughnessy's, niece, granddaughter, aunt, a relation, a relative. Lifelong relationships, all because of classes structured in this way. Well, Jon started out doing weaving and fiber work, and over at the Adult Arts and Crafts Center, he set up a dye area and a silk screen area. And then when he helped redesign this particular center, he modernized the whole process for weaving, and it came to include spinning and dyeing and dyeing on silk and things like this that are hard to imagine. So in the arts and crafts movement that developed, the thing that happened was they started pushing crafts into modernization. And the idea was everything was made by hand, it was full quality, your imagination was set free. And Jon did a lot of work like this piece back here on this wall, this orange piece. And yes, the orange piece, and he dyed all of that material, and he, what? Oh, it is amazing. That work is a small piece. Most of the works that he did were 6 to 8 feet tall and weighed a couple tons, and they could be suspended from the ceiling, or they had rebar structures that they were built onto. They were just far out, is what we said in those days. They were quite amazing. Bob?
Do you have any idea how many of his works are not here? You speak of the large variety.
I would say that the bulk of those works are not here. I believe this piece we borrowed from the Columbus Museum of Art to get into this show, but most of his work is in a railroad container on a farm in Iowa, all locked up, and they are quite amazing. And we tried to get them, but we didn't get a lot of help, and it would have been it wouldn't have been cost efficient to get them here. It would have cost thousands of dollars to move them here. And in a way, that was the beginning of his career. That was when he was younger. He had more energy. He could put all these things together. And then as he started getting older and these things were sent out to shows all over the United States, it was very costly. You had to develop all this boxing and crating in cases in order to be able to send them. It was very costly to do that. But he was in a lot of national shows and also in. So we have that piece, and we have this piece, which is behind me, which also is on loan. This is on loan from the Ohio Crafts Museum. So this gives you an example, and all these pieces are dyed. They're all hand-dyed. He dyed all the material for this. Quite amazing. So then as he got older, he started doing paperwork, paper pieces and raffia pieces, and you'll see those along over in this area. And then he moved into, he did a lot of painting on silk and a lot of wax work on silk. And then he did these trees and these paper things. So his imagination didn't have any boundaries. So he went from being very structured on looms to doing off-loom soft sculptures. He was internationally known with some of the best people that have ever been around in this area today. And then as he aged, he moved into a different area. One lesson here is that there's never any really any reason to stop creating. And Jon was creating until the very end. And so now I think I pretty much have bungled through most of what I was going to bungle through. I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Brown. Tracy knew Jon in a different capacity. So she's going to give you a different facet of Jon. Here, I'll trade you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am so glad to be here today for Jon's 85th birthday, and I really miss him. But I started here in 2000. Taking a class. I came in and I talked to Vossi and I said, what should I take? I've never made any art. And thank God she recommended Jon's surface design studio. And the class that I took was the only time. Every other class I took was full of women, and it was wonderful, but I was the only student. And it was a night class, and I had just gotten a divorce. I was like in shambles, and anyway, I would start to make something, and I'd go up to Jon, and I'd say, Jon, what color should I use? What should I do? And he'd say, it's all about choices. He would never tell me, like he did Sandy, if I should use purple. But I want to just read a few things about the studio craft movement, which is really, when Jon passed away, I got a call from Sandra Rhodes in London, who he brought here for a show. She's a very beautiful woman and a designer. She's 83 now, and she's still creating her work, and it's incredible. And she said Jon Wahling in her, she did an intro for his memorial video I made, and she said, Jon Wahling was my dear friend and a key player in the American craft movement. After Jon died, I found this statement underlined, and this really encompasses what I think his way of teaching was. I'm going to read it. This is perhaps why it is said that a good teacher is taught by his students, for he is not to teach them, but to help bring to maturity what is already in them. And I saw that, and I was just like, oh, Jon. And he really had a passion for teaching, for being with, nurturing students. So I took that class, and one day I kind of came to, and I looked at it when I had done, and I was in this zone, this space that I love now, and I was creating, and it was just flowing from me, and I fell in love with the creative process. So unfortunately, I said, I think I need to get an art degree or something. So I left Jon and went to Ohio State, which I wish I would have just stayed with him. But it ended up being beneficial because I took photography, and I ended up being drawn into the design, and I learned websites, all the visual communication things that I used. And when in 2012, I moved to a condo on Broad Street, and I called Jon, and I said, Jon, will you come look at my condo and tell me what colors I should use? Still asking him. And he said, sure, where do you live? And I lived a block and a half from him. It was the beginning of a deeper intimacy where I really spent, initially he would call me and say, I lost my email. It's gone. I can't find it, or my TV won't turn on, or whatever. It's fuzzy, and I'd come down and do his computer things, and then when COVID hit, he was teaching at Columbus State, and he had to put all his classes online. So I felt this assurance, because it was 5 days a week, full-time thing. And I just felt deep in my gut that I should do it. And I have grandchildren here. It was, I made that commitment, and I'm so glad I did, because I would go in the mornings every day. I would be with Jon. I watched him teach, online. And, I really tried to create this great visual package for students, and I thought, oh, this is going to really, move Jon's students to a new level. But what I saw is that Jon Wahling needed no visual anything. Those students would start, and they couldn't. I'm like, oh my God, Jon, are you sure they should even be taking art? And by the end, they were making incredible. He just drew things out of people. He gave people confidence to be able to create, and he spent a lot of time with those students. So that's a little bit of my history with Jon. And what we did at one point is I would come over on Saturdays. He invited me. He said, I want to go through this collage book. And so as you start in the very back of the gallery, you'll see some collage work. And I would go to his house on Saturday, and it was like, I felt like I was going to Grandma's house, and he'd have these little ambrosia salads and soup and cake and whatever, just all this little lunch. And we would sit in his studio, and I would be on one end, and he would be on the other. He was here, and I was here, and we would make collages. And and I just would watch him work. And one thing he always did with every piece of work, and he would always tell me this, and I did it for my painting and things like that, but I never did it for my ceramics, was every piece of work, and I have bins of his color studies that he did. Every piece of work he did a color study, and he saved them, and he wrote notes on them, every single one. I have literally boxes of these things for everything that he ever did. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you. So when Jon died, I'm going to jump around, and then I'll get back to the retrospective. I had this box, and I went from watercolor to ceramics, and I just heard him say, because he would tell me when I started doing ceramics, do color studies, draw in your journal. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't really listen. And when he died, I just heard him, and I took out one of his color palettes, and I made this box. And as you can see, it would have been just a plain little box, but with the color, it just sings. And I really got it. It was after. But when I moved to Jon's, he asked me to help redo his resume and do a website. So as I started looking, if you go to jonbwahling.com, you will see, you can look at his resume and website that I designed, but it's amazing. I'm like, Jon, you did all this stuff? I mean, it's just pages and pages. Most people that have really long resumes don't really need them, but Jon did, because he exhibited all over the world. He taught, like, before he even came to Columbus. I found a note from the person that founded Penland, and she wrote to my dear friend and the most wonderful weaving instructor. I mean, he was deeply involved in the arts and crafts movement, even before. I mean, we were so fortunate to have him here in Columbus. So when we started working on his stuff, I said, Jon, it's amazing. So, some of it I don't even have good photographs of. We were going to go out to Iowa and photograph all that stuff that's out there. But we didn't get to do that. But the thing that I learned about him was that through each medium, he really had the same process. He was dedicated to ensuring that it was perfect, that it was, the colors, like he just, and he would always like these pieces he was so excited about. Each one you can just see the colors, the shapes, how they just sing. Anyway, these. He did a lot of, I have a box of cuts that he did, studies of how they would integrate. I mean, he just did a lot of studies before he even started with this. And then he did a few little small ones, and I don't know where he got the idea. I have no idea. But I know they're an abstracted landscape of some sort in his mind. I would ask him, how do you get inspired? When I was upstairs, he said, I'd look out the window at the upstairs, and I see, and he would take whatever he saw from there, or from his memories. He did a lot of travels to Africa and different places, and these over here are really as a result of his travels in Africa. And anyway, yeah, these surface design pieces, yes, he painted those on silk and cloth, and yeah. So anyway, the thing that the pieces down on this wall down here, I would come in the morning for class, and Jon would say, I did another drawing. And we would sit and put it up on his easel, and we'd talk about them. Who knew that they would be those are the last things that Jon ever made. And I just think they're a treasure, those on in the black frames. Anyway, he taught me so much about his practice, his dedication. And what I find as I make art, it's like a meditation. I find deep peace, and it's just was such a gift that he gave me. But we were doing the website, and he was talking to Hal and a few other artists, another one of his friends in Kentucky that he had brought, and Arturo Sandoval, and they were encouraging him to do a retrospective. So he started going around to look at different spaces with Hal Stevens, and I was behind the scenes, and I was going to do a book or something, whatever, and help him organize the exhibition. And they were more of his works from, like, these are all from 2000. These are all the works that haven't been shown. These hadn't been shown. These haven't been shown. So he wanted to make sure they were shown. And anyway, so after Jon passed away, Hal was he was the driver behind this exhibit. Because I would say, I don't know, I went over and looked at the gallery, and I'm like, it's pretty big. I've never done anything like this. And I had taken all Jon's art with permission from the family out of the home and just kept it at my house because I knew I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what. And I talked to the Columbus Museum, and so after lots of persuasion, I said, okay, Hal, I'll do it. And I'm so glad I did, because it just came together pretty much. The art speaks for itself. It's incredible. There's pieces from different parts of his career, and I hope that that you've been able to go around and really look at them and enjoy them as much as I have. When I came in today, I was just sitting, just looking at one sculpture, this one right here, and the colors in that, and the shapes are just, I mean, it's just incredible. So Jon, my dear friend, my mentor, he didn't just mentor me. I know that he's mentored people in the audience, and one is my husband, who he's right here. So this is my husband, Brad Sutton, and he started painting 6 years ago. I got him a little set of acrylic paints, and I woke up in the morning and I was like, "You painted this?" I mean, he's a barber. I mean, you know, he would always say, "I'm a barber, Jim," or whatever. And so Jon came over. You know, I told Jon about it, and he came over. And Brad, what did talk about? Do you want to share something about Jon?
Sure.
Here, I'll bring this to you. You can just sit down.
Hello, everyone. Bradley Sutton here, and I'm a retired barber, and I started painting 6 years ago, like she said, and I had known Jon for quite a few years through Tracy, and I had a little gallery in my barbershop, so I was always interested in the creative process, and I tried lots of mediums and avenues and was profoundly mediocre in all of them. I found it, or I would lose my interest, and I never attempted painting because I thought that was the pinnacle of all, fine art, and it just was intimidating to me until Tracy bought me some stuff, and I started working with them, and it just started happening, kind of on its own. And Jon was really sort of emotional. I'm sorry. Very important for his encouragement and our conversations. Just it lit a fire. Sorry, going through this. I didn't expect this, but it stays with me every day. And one thing that Jon said is, if you want to be good at painting, paint every day. That's it. Just paint every day, and be open. And I started to learn about myself. At 63 years old, learning brand new things, and I'm very grateful. I can't talk anymore.
I wanted to say, I think you should introduce yourself not as a retired barber, but as a rewired barber. The art of barber, that's an art too, right?
Yeah.
Of course it is. And that you just are rewiring like Jon did.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so much I could talk about as far as our conversations, but one thing that's been important in my work is when he was doing these sculptures, our conversations about negative and positive space, and how that works, and how the line and color, and they all work together in a way that is impresses your senses, and to combine them in a way that'll produce the best sort of feeling off of that. But anyway, those were intense conversations about that, and I learned a great deal. So, he wasn't strict about technique or stuff, even though he was with himself, all these color studies and all that stuff. but he was very open so people, their own creativity could come forth, you know. Not his creativity and someone else, but their own. And that was really quite a remarkable thing to experience in his presence. Yeah.
Thank you, Brad.
I know other people have stories. Does anyone else want to talk about their experiences with Jon?
One time I took a Shibori class and I was the only student. And so he worked one-on-one with me in dyeing, and he still has it. Took some weaving as well, back.
Thank you.
I probably took one of the last few classes that he taught here, and I was in a group, a surface design group, and there weren't many of us. There were probably 5 or 6 of us, and this was fairly new to me, so I'm not sure what I'm doing. And wait a minute, what do you mean about this and that dyeing? And so I started asking questions, and he sat back in his chair and he answered every one of my questions. And he just sat there with his arms folded and watched me, and I'd ask something else and he'd answer it. We came out of the class and one of the people said, well, he didn't teach much today. And I looked at her and I said, oh, I get it. He's going for the people who are interested in asking questions and interested in the process. Otherwise, he's presented the process, and now it's yours. And that, to me, was what I got from him, is it's the process. You figure it out, and I can help you with that, but the art is yours.
Beautiful. Thank you, Fran. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
We're waiting for this. Aha. It's coming back, this microphone. You were going to say something, Bob?
I just wanted to ask a question.
Okay, here you go, and then we'll get back here.
If we wanted to see his work 3 years from now in a museum, what would be left? Did you say the Columbus Museum of Art? Where? Would we see even one piece?
This piece is part of their collection. This piece back here is one of their collection. This is in the Craft Museum collection, and I think they have 2 other pieces in the Columbus Museum of Jon's work. So after he died, we were in conversation about, him and his work, and they exhibited that for a long period of time until we got a hold of it here. So.
The Craft Museum.
Are his hanging things? I remember the one hanging upstairs in the weaving studio that were around. Oh, nice and nice. It's hard for people to hear.
I remember the piece that hung up in the weaving studio. It was round and it had all the peach, and the stripes and everything. What happened to it? Is it in the barn? Or?
I do not. You know what? Jon had so much work that I didn't even know. After he died, I was so heartbroken, and I would sit at his house and just weep. I tried to gather up, but he had a whole garage full of art, which I never got to, which I wish I would have, because there was so much art they sold in the sale. But there is his art in Iowa, which at some point I hope we will be able to gift to museums around the country, because his work, he was in the very forefront of our weaving sculptures, these sculptures. He did an exhibit in New York, and he was quoted with Annie Albers and people like that as one of the forerunners in the arts and crafts movement.
I remember Jon from when I was a teenager. My dad was a silversmith and had won a liturgical arts award with the Museum of Art, and we went to an award ceremony at St. Charles, and I just remember Jon being there and the wonderful food he made. And then probably 15 years or more later, I did take a couple classes from him at Parsons and Oak, and then another one here much later. So A very special person. I'm glad I met him.
There was someone over here that wanted to speak. I can't remember. Does anyone else would like to say anything? Yeah, right here.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question about the piece that's on the front over there and the three pieces in the back where he's incorporated the wood and all. Does anybody have any comment on that, or how did he get to that? Or?
I do. I can tell you. So on our Saturday mornings, Jon brought out a big box of these rolls of packing tape. When you used to be able to seal packages, you'd have to wet them and seal them as a thick white. And he said, "Tracy, do you want some of this? I have boxes of it." And I was like, what is it? And he said, well, he would take it, and it was like a canvas, pretty much. It was a canvas material. And he would fold it in half, and like a lot of these sculptures, some of them, I'm trying to see if there's some here, this one probably back there, and he would fold those, and then he would use those as his canvas, particularly on those on the back wall, and he would use those. And I tried literally for about 3 hours to just fold one piece in half and make it neat and be able to have it to use it. I couldn't do it. I mean, his skill, I was like, forget it. No, I don't want it. But he would, he used that and he would, he just had he had a mind that really abstracted three-dimensional, two-dimensional, whatever it was. He saw things wherever he went, from his travels, from looking out the window upstairs. He would abstract, what he saw in nature, and to the point, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. Is there any other questions? I really am.
Let's bring Sandy up to the podium here, hear more about her. You two join in conversation together. Here.
What do you want to talk about?
Well,
I am unsure, but I met Sandy before Jon at Jon's parties, and Sandy, I've gotten to know her so much better through this whole process. She was integral in pulling this. I sat down with she and Franco, who's in the front row here, and I said, will you help me do this? We were at a restaurant across the street, and I was so nervous and scared. I was just like, and Hal was in the hospital, and I had made a commitment, and they said yes. And Sandy is a mastermind. Whatever she is a mastermind. I'm telling you, if you ever, she's amazing. And so she looked at all the pictures, and she just. She knew. She said, yes, it'll work. We have enough work, etc. So she really, and Franco, they were integral in moving this whole thing forward. And Franco and my husband and my cousin Jeff, that's sitting behind, he was a very long-time friend of Jon's. We all hung the work together, so it was really an adventure.
Oh, do I have a favorite piece? Actually, I think my favorite are the three pieces on the back wall. Mm-hmm. They're stunning. They're just so stunning. And I hung them up in before this show opened, all this stuff was in my basement. Mm-hmm. And I hung those on the basement wall because they're so fragile. And every time I would go down in the basement for something, I got to look at them. And it was just really delightful. Mm. I don't know. I don't know what to say. He was just such an amazing person. I do want to say that I began what I was saying about my dinner with Jon and Hal Stevens and Jim Mason to get the history of the old Arts and Crafts Center. And those three people are not with us anymore. And so whatever they gave to us is still with us. It's moving forward in the way that we teach and help others do things. But the point of their being was that they were the best at what they were doing at the time. And the Adult Arts and Crafts Center was fortunate enough to have the best and the finest instructors for people in the community. And that's still happening here. And that's one of the amazing things about the Art Center, the CAC and the Adult Arts and Crafts Center. This was put together to share the arts and crafts with a large community. And the idea that adults needed these kinds of things, and they needed to appreciate beauty in a way that had nothing to do with machines and industrialization. And that it's a reminder that it's the beauty of the living things and the natural things that are the important things to our spirit and our soul. And I think Jon epitomized that. Tracy was talking about how he'd look out the windows and he'd see things and he could make those shapes and create those images and those feelings. Well, that really is what the arts and crafts movement was all about. And it's still going on here, which is just, I'm so happy about that. So I think it's maybe 10 minutes till. I'm kind of hungry. I'd like a cupcake.
I have one. I thought of one more
thing?
story.
Okay.
One more story. Oh my God! It just it left me. What is it? You were talking about. Oh my goodness! Hopefully it'll come back to me. But what a.
Interrupt for just a moment, Todd, before you get on the elevator. And Jeff, as you were talking about this ongoing life here at the Cultural Arts Center, Todd and Jeff Martin, for sure, have that spirit continued. And facilitating every day, what's happening in an ongoing way here at this
Maybe they should come
jewel
up,
of a
in
city.
honor of Jon, maybe they should come up here and let us. Why don't you get up there, Jeff?
Yes. I'll say while Jeff's coming forward, we had a Zoom conversation when I first met him, and I was just like, oh, do they really get it? Do they know? And he, are we going to be able to do this? And is it going to be? And everything that I shared, he was just fabulous, and he really gave me such a great comfort that this center, that's exactly what you just said. That
And look at how the audience is going, yes, yes. And I think Vazi could come up and stand next. Come on, Vazi.
Come on, Vazi.
Yeah. She got me in 2020, close to the time when Jon was in the hospital. She said, write to him. Well, I feel like as I sat down and wrote to him, she facilitated a life that I had no idea was so serious. Come on, Vazi. Yeah, come on, y'all come.
So what's going on? What's
This is
going on
the
here?
spirit of the ongoing life that you've made reference to here in this jewel of the city.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right.
Bravo.
And thanks everybody for being here. I do want to just say thanks so much to Tracy and Franco and Sandy. I think people don't always know how much work goes into doing something like this. They have been working for a long time. And when we started this conversation a while back, it was just a given. I mean, we definitely needed to do this show here. It was just meant to be, and I'm so glad that you all were willing to put that work in to make this happen, because it's really is gorgeous. And I've been thinking recently too. It's been a tough couple of years, right? And we did lose some very important people. And I think back, the Cultural Arts Center's been here for about 44 years now, and I like to think kind of how Sandy mentioned about the people that have worked here over that period of time and the impact that they have had on this city. And I think it's hard to really even fathom what that means to a space and a city and the creativity I just think sometimes about the number of people who have come through these doors and have had the chance to work with someone like Jon or Jim Mason, and then to be able to go out into the city and see the topiary park or something, you know, marvelous like that, or see a piece that's in the museum and say, I worked with that person. Like, I had a chance to learn from them. And you know, I didn't have to go to school to do it, or I didn't have to enroll in college. You know, I could come into a neighborhood-style recreation program and get a chance to work with someone like that. And I think that is special. And we're so grateful that we've had a chance to have those people be a part of this building and this community. So, yeah, I'm just so glad we could share this again.
People used to say that you could get a degree in art and craft at the Cultural Arts Center without having to go to a university. That's how good it was.
I wanted to say this last thing, and this was told by Jon was one of 4 brothers. He was the eldest of 4 brothers. He grew up on a farm in Iowa, and he went to Cranbrook, which was one of the universities that really was invested in the whole craft movement. And I didn't know that until I was doing research for his website. But anyway, his brothers loaded up Jon's stuff in an old station wagon, and they drove him out. He had an apartment on Parsons, and they were just like, "Are you sure you want us to leave you here?" They were like nervous about even leaving him here, and he's like, "Yes, yeah." But he what a gift that I'm so glad they left him here, and it was all, he was from the farm and to our great city, and he really made it his city.
Do you know how he happened to come here?
Say it again, Amy.
Do you know how he happened to come to Columbus?
I know that he was teaching. He taught at Black Mountain College, he taught weaving at other schools, and where he met a lot of his friends that were lifelong artist friends of him. So, and I don't know how they recruited him here, but I'm glad they did, whoever did that.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
Okay.
So in 1990, I also had an apartment on Parsons. Didn't know Jon, and started with the department then, and still didn't know Jon, but I knew him because everybody talked about this Jon Wahling at the Cultural Arts Center. I'm like, who is this guy? I've got to meet this guy. And unfortunately, I never did. I never was able to meet him in person, but seeing his work here, I know him from that. So thank you for putting this all together.
Well, we give a special thanks to Jennifer McCracken and her husband, Tim,
Thanks,
for
Jen.
those cupcakes. Aren't they delicious? John would say, "Thank you for helping me celebrate my birthday," which would have been what year?
85.
85. Okay, well, he's with us here in spirit, and we thank you all for celebrating. And Tracy, thank you. Sandy, thank you for bringing him to life.
Great.